Alright, I made it back okay. Took a trip up to Worry Hut, had a great riding. It was a little dusty. Didn't rain like I'd hoped. I noticed a problem on the trail. I got back, got to looking at the front of the RZR, and realized that right around this area, there's a little ding about right there. And this A-arm was bent. Now, I had no idea when I actually did that, whether I did it during that trip or the trip that I took before to Windrock, and just didn't notice it. I kind of felt that maybe it drove just a little bit different, but I couldn't tell exactly what it was. But now I know. So what I've done is I've ordered another set of A-arms. These A-arms are for a 1.5 inch offset, so it's going to push the tires forward 1.5 inches. I got these from Super ATV. Again, you know, this is not a paid thing. I ordered these just like everybody else does. If you check around, I did not, but if you check around, they generally do have some kind of coupon code that you can type in for some money off. So be sure to do a Google search on that and find out what their current offer is. I could have saved 10%, I think, on this. And anyway, it comes well packaged. It came really quick. It came FedEx, and I got it in 3 days with the free shipping, which is pretty awesome. I did look at the instructions that they provide on the website. One of the things that I'm unsure about, this is how they come packaged. It looks really nice. But if you notice there, hopefully you can see it on camera, it has a sticker, pre-adjusted, so you don't have to. We're just cool like that. So that's a pretty nice touch, and you know, I am running stock tires, I don't have a lift. So I'm hoping that this is just ready to go, ready to bolt up. I was kind of dreading having to really adjust or check things. Really, I'm going to check the links and, you know, caster camber just really quick, just by measuring the links. And once I get them on, just take a check. But I'm hoping, as shipped, that this just bolts up. Now again, this is not a this is not going to be stock suspension when I get done. I'm going to be moving forward 1.5 inches. I'm also going to have high clearance A-arms. It looks like, I mean, this has hit something about right where I think this would have actually cleared had I had the high clearance A-arms. So we're going to unbox these. Again, you know, nice fiberglass tape. They're well packaged. I think the shipping manifest says they weigh about 42 pounds. This is just the front. And the main reason for doing the offset is I do plan on doing a 39 or maybe a 29 or 30 inch tire at some point, and this will give me enough clearance, at least in the front, to where if I don't end up with enough clearance in the back, I can always add this same thing in the back. The difference is the rear, they highly recommend that you upgrade axles. So these are really well packaged. And there we are. And there's going to be 4 pieces. There's going to be an upper arm times 2 and a lower arm times 2, 1 for each side. I ordered mine in black, so hopefully these are black. And so far, it's basically just packaging in the arms. It's not a big slew of parts. Okay, so we'll take one of these out. A good sign that I'm seeing is see tie strap, and when I ordered these, it actually said free bushings. And I'm hoping to see that's done, and all I really got to do is swap the ball joint. But we'll see. And it looks like that's the case. I'll get this out where you can see it. Main reason I was thinking it, yeah, it's come with them. It's typically if you have bushings in something, a trick to keeping said bushings with the part is to put a tie strap through it. And I've done that with shocks and any other bushings, especially if you're shipping something yourself. That works really well for keeping the bushings with the part. And again, you know, these have multiple layers of protection on them. They're a shiny black powder coat, which it doesn't match my existing arms, but it won't matter because I'm going to be replacing both of them. So that's kind of a shot. It looks like it does come with the bushings, so that'll save me a little bit of time. And also, I'm assuming there's grease fittings somewhere in one of these packages. And I think there's brake adapters. But overall, the powder coat looks really well. Again, you know, that's not an exact match for my razor. With the exception of since I'm taking all of this flat black stuff off and replacing it with gloss, it'll match the rest of the razor. My suspension components are like a really flat, this is kind of a matte, a little bit glossier finish, and obviously I've got a black pearl razor, so this pretty much is, you know, matches the shiny black that's on the razor. So I'm going to get all these out and just kind of get them assembled. Make sure that I have all the parts before I start taking this apart. Once I get these out, I'll take a shot and then we'll start taking apart the front end of this razor. And just be sure, you know, don't throw away any packing or anything till you've got everything. You know, I know I'm missing parts that I'm looking for. What I'm looking for right now are the Zerk fittings. And hopefully they're either still in the box or somewhere in the midst of this packaging. Okay, I got them all out of the box. Hardware is pretty easy to find. It was stuffed in the box up like this behind one of the packs. The only thing I wanted to know when I took this arm out, the other one was really tight. This one's loose on both sides. Another thing I wanted to know, it doesn't bother me. So I'm going to check these measurements before I assemble this thing. But one thing on the adjustable nodes, this has like a crinkle type powder finish on these joints, where this is a smooth glossy black. And that's the same on both of the ones that have the adjustable bushings for camber and caster. Anyway, so I've got everything. This kit looks pretty simple. I've read on the forums about these grease fittings. They look like stubby metric grease fittings. So I'm going to check those before I install them, just to make sure they work with my grease gun. If not, I'll swap them out. And you got brake line clips, screws for the brake line clips, and then you have these spacer washers, and this is for the shock mount. But anyway, I'm going to move this stuff out of the way. We're going to get this jacked up and get these old parts off. Okay, we're just going to pull the tires off. If you don't have one, you'll need a 19mm to get these wheel lugs off. These are torque back on, and I'll check the specs, but I believe they're around 120. So you know, it's nice to have an air wrench to get these off. And as I've done in other videos, I've got a real good habit of putting these back on just to protect the threads. Make sure that they don't get dinged up. More importantly, that you don't lose them. Okay, the first thing I'm checking, I know that I have to take the brake lines off, and so I don't forget, and just see if I can actually get them off without taking the rivets out. Kind of just pulling these loose. This one down here is a lot harder to get to. I'll need a tool for it. You want to be real careful taking these brake lines off. I'll move the camera and show you. You want to make sure you don't pinch it. Okay, so what you're going to want to do to get this brake line off, this one you can kind of pry with your hands and get out. It'll give you a little bit of slack to move it around. This one you want to be real careful about not nicking the brake line itself. Like I say, at this point if I break one of these, it's not the end of the world. But what I do want to do is not damage the brake line. Once you get it part way out, you can stick the screwdriver in the slot, pry up, and the brake line will come out. And there you can see we don't have any damage or any dings. Just make sure the screwdriver doesn't actually touch the brake line. So we got our brake line free. The reason I'm doing that, I think the prescribed way, this may not work out, but I'm actually going to try to basically pull just the A-arms off and leave this whole assembly the way that it is. Mainly to save time, and two, I just greased this. I wasn't planning on doing this, so pretty much the RZR is ready to go to Windrock other than this. So I'm going to try basically just pulling these A-arms off and setting this whole assembly over on a box or a stand or something over here to hold it up. The main thing you want to be careful of is this brake line, and once you take this loose you get a little bit more movement, or freedom of movement. I think the tire is about the right height. And these are 50mm bolts, hold ball joints. And a ratcheting wrench and a razor. Ratcheting wrenches are like gold. They really speed things up and let you get in there and get things off a lot quicker. So we're 15 on both sides. I'm just going to get everything loose, and I'll do the final beating part once I get everything loosened up. All I got to say is this bottom one is on there really tight. When in doubt, use a larger tool. Tie rod end bolt is going to be an 18mm. And this was assembled by Polaris. I noticed they actually have NICs on the threads, which I've never seen before. We'll put a fresh coat on when we get done here. And one thing I'm going to do, just so I don't get confused, and I'm going to take a picture real quick of how this brake line routes and where the tie rod's at. And these are, bolt goes in from the front of the razor, nut is on the, towards the rear of the razor on both of these. Now I'm going to go grab some persuasion. And these do have a washer, kind of the same thing, bolts fall in the pattern. The bolt goes in from the driver's, or the front of the razor, and the nut points to the rear of the razor. And that's out. This is a straight one. Doesn't look like anything's really hit this one. There may be a little spot there, but it doesn't look like any bends. Looks like this one's mainly scraped over it. The bushings don't look bad either. But one thing I can already see, the Super ATV A-arms are significantly larger in diameter. They're heavier, and they're probably a lot tougher than these are. And that's pretty in every respect, even how they weld these on. These are just basically, you know, I don't want to say cheaply made. I'm sure that these are intended to be some type of fuse. You put a lot of pressure on them, these probably give a little bit. But the new parts are going to be significantly more robust. So I'm going to go ahead and completely assemble the other arm. Again, these ball joints are in really good shape. They're still sticking where they're supposed to stick. I'm going to get this cleaned up and knock this joint out. If you've never taken one of these out before, always remember, you know, get this C-clip off, and when you put it back on, always make sure that that's fully seated. Actually, I usually take like a small punch or something and kind of just hammer around it, just make sure it's all the way seated. You don't want that to come off while you're riding. Alright, we got the first side on. This is the driver's side. Just a couple things I want to mention about the install. One, I was able to successfully get these on without much trouble using a bungee cord to basically tie everything up out of the way. I didn't have to disconnect the drive shaft or any of that stuff. I just used the tire as something to set this on, and I was able to get everything. One thing I'll say about fitment, the lower went in very well. I did double check the measurements, make sure that you tighten these, make sure that you put your C-clips on, double check that those clips are on the ball joints before you continue on. The bottom fit okay. The way that I found to work is you want to use something non-marring and just kind of start tapping it in and working in. And as you pick up and down on it, it'll fit. These fit really tight. The top, literally this tab had to bend over just a little bit. I made a little bit extra room just to get it in there lined up. Then once I got it started, it was pretty easy to get the screws in. I didn't end up tapping the screws. I basically kept working at it till it lined up. Looking at my initial caster and camber, it does look correct. Basically, I've got about 2 to 3 degree tilt back, and maybe 1% on the camber, and I'll probably have to adjust. I think before I've got just a little bit of too much toe out, and that's something I can adjust. It's really not related to these arms, but I didn't want to take any measurements or anything until I actually had the arms on. One thing I'll note on the 1000S, they do have a tab here for the front sway bar. There's not a front sway bar on a 1000S, at least not the 2016. So that tab is just sitting there. Really, the only thing that I like to do on this side is basically attach this brake line. It looks like it's going to route really nice down. There's a bracket here and then another one here. All in all, as far as doing this, I did on the ball joints, I used a vise, and basically that entails putting a socket around it. One thing I'll recommend is when you're driving them back in, make sure that you have a thin enough wall socket. I ended up having to replace one of the ball joints because I caught the boot with the socket. So don't make that mistake. If anything, just I ended up actually using on the one that I caught, when I put them back on, I'm just using a split piece of conduit. It doesn't take a lot of force, and basically what I'm doing is I'm putting this in the vise and tightening the vise. I'm using a bigger socket than the rear of the ball joint to push the ball joint out, so I push it into that cavity, and the exact opposite on the other side. The difference is all you want to do is clear the boot and clear the shaft where you can push the ball joint all in. And again, make sure you put those clips on. Tie rod, I didn't have any issues with putting my tie rod on, but I know a lot of people do. And the reason being is that it starts spinning. And the reason it's spinning because this is a tapered fit. So what you want to do is push down and fully seat the tie rod before you try to start tightening down on the bolt. And that'll provide enough friction in that tapered section to actually get that tightened. One thing that Super ATV instructions say is to trim off a little bit of this plastic. I'm not going to trim it off at this point, and mainly here's why. That's pretty much at full tilt, and it does hit, but it only deflects maybe a quarter of an inch. This is nowhere even close to like breaking or snapping. I'm going to check again when I actually have it loaded and go up and down with the suspension. I don't know that I need to cut off an inch. I think if I cut off maybe a quarter of an inch, it wouldn't even hit. But that's just preference. This thing's pretty flexible in terms of moving out of the way. But if anything, I'm probably going to just either leave it alone if it's not hitting more than this. If it does hit more than this, I'll probably just start lopping it off in small sections. I want to leave as much of that there as possible. That does protect your boot, especially if you're going through mud or anything like that. That keeps any sticks or anything from going in and actually hitting the boot on your drive shaft. Okay, we've got one side finished tonight. This is the end result. You can see over here, this is a stock setup. It's hard to tell from the side, but if you take a look down, I don't know how well this is going to come in on camera, but that front tire is actually sitting about an inch and a half further ahead than this tire is. This is kind of what the stock setup looks like. And this is the much beefier setup. Just looking at it, I haven't taken any accurate measurements. I think I'm good on my alignment. It looks like it's the toe out's just barely toed out, which is what I want. But I'll take final measurements once I get the other side on. I guess the most important thing is you can see how much additional clearance it gives, and you can see kind of the bend there in the stock tube that wouldn't have even have come close to hitting had I had these on. Anyways, I'll get to the other side tomorrow and finish up this video. I am probably going to end up trimming this plastic just a little bit. There's a possibility that if I was at full tilt and bouncing the suspension up and down, that the lip of that could get caught. So I am going to do a little bit of plastic trimming to finish this up. I'm just going to give you a close-up look at the brake line. I've tested it full tilt. It's not fully clamped. It's going to be hard to see with the camera, but you can see there's a clamp there, and there's also the clamp here. And you know, you basically want to route the line where it's not going to be, you know, directly rubbing on anything, or if you can, keep it as parallel as possible to the pipe. That'll give it to, you know, you don't want it to do that because that'll rub a hole in the pipe, but the straighter you can get it, the better. And that looks pretty good. I had to fiddle with it just a little bit to get it lined up the way I wanted it. Anyway, I'm gonna close down for the night, and I'll get back on this first thing tomorrow after work. Alright, we've got a little further along. It's another day. Came out here after work, and I've already got all the arms pulled off. I've got the lower arm on. This side went a lot quicker, obviously, and I've got everything laid out. I'm getting ready to push the ball joint in the upper arm and get that installed. So I'm going to go over and get that put together, and I'm almost ready to put this thing back together and see how it turns out. I still do need to cut this this little boot guard. I think the instructions say to cut about 1 inch. That's about what I'm going to cut off. I think that'll be just right. So really the instructions are pretty much spot on, with the exception of the adjustments. They look like they do come pre-adjusted. As long as you're real careful and don't let that end spin, you'll stay in adjustment and be able to just bolt these on if you've got stock suspension. I'm going to run over and get that other ball joint in and put the rest of this together. Okay, we've got it installed. I took it out for a quick spin. Everything works good. I really don't notice a huge amount of difference. Maybe I did get it out in a little gravel area and got it up to more speed. It seems like it may hold a little better line just because it's a little bit longer. Again, this is only 1.5 inch you know, extension this way. I did notice a big difference from the driver's seat. I was kind of wondering if I'd be able to see the front tire. And I can barely tell the difference from the driver's seat. Looking up front, I can definitely tell the difference. The angle, your attack angle on an obstacle, definitely these tires are up front. They pretty much come to about right here on the bumper, so basically the tire is actually sticking out, you know, well past this point. So, you know, before it was way down here, now it's further up. If you were to hit something like a log or something like that, you'd be able to get up and over it. Overall, I'm really happy. I ended up not trimming these plastic boot guards. I'll probably do that sometime tomorrow. I want to get a really clean cut on that. It does look like it could interfere. Right now it's really not hitting with it sitting in this stable position. Going to turn the tire here and give you an idea. So that's basically a full cut. So right now it's not hitting anything because it's just above this. But if your suspension were to droop down at the wrong time, it could catch the lip and possibly break that plastic, or even worse, it could damage the caliper because that is directly attached to the caliper. So tomorrow I'll probably go in with something that I can actually get a really straight cut with that, which I have up in the electronics lab, and I'll grab that. Anyway, overall, pretty happy. Again, these are the Super ATV high clearance arms for the RZR 900S and 1000S. This probably took, I think I read online 2 hours. It's more like 4 hours if you take your time and really double check everything. Which I'm doing, because basically I'm going to ride this a little bit out in the yard, and then I'm going to take it straight to Windrock. So I wanted to make sure everything was tight and everything was aligned. But everything looks good. I really didn't have to change anything. I pretty much have bolted them on, and I'm still within spec on caster, camber, and toe in, toe out. I really don't notice a big drive line. I know on the rear they recommend that you change out the axles. The front, it just barely changed the angle. Basically, when I have this jacked up, I basically turn the tire full tilt and just make sure that the CVs are not locking up, and they're not. They're still free turning. So I think you're okay on the front, just having standard axles. The rear, you probably need the Rhino axles. But overall, just looking at, especially when you stand away and look underneath, you basically created a void. It's almost the width of the RZR where you have full clearance. Where before, you know, you had a really pretty steep angle coming down from this joint, which starts about right here. So it's pretty significant, especially if you're going through a rut. I'm gonna have a lot less stuff dragging. Should help me from from getting stuck, and B, from bending parts. The rear on these is a lot more robust than the front, but at some point I may change out the rear. Anyway, if you have any questions or any comments, drop me a line, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.